So what that raises for me is thinking about how we do safety planning with our clients. As we're thinking about safety planning, right, this is a really important tool that we could be bringing to safety planning conversations, but because we're so siloed, we don't always have all of that information at our fingertips the way that we should.
And I think too, there's such a thing as post-exposure prophylaxis too, which is PEP, which you can get if you have been assaulted and are concerned about the transmission of HIV. You can get 30 days worth of medication that will dramatically reduce the possibility of contracting HIV. But it has become politicized, just like everything else, because for myriad reasons, a lot of clinicians don't like to give it. They're convinced the patients won't take it. They think it's a waste of time. They're worried about side effects. They think that patients are being coerced, So there are a million reasons that we underuse both of those. And I think that is a conversation that needs to be had more broadly. Because of the way we educate clinicians in this country, we often do things by algorithm, if this, then that. And so recognizing that there's maybe if this, then maybe not that opportunity, and to understand and hear from the community and from other pieces of this movement what the impact of that might be is vital.
I think mandated reporting is a huge problem with Title IX. And all of the professors who I know who do gender violence work have really struggled with the idea that we're being made mandated reporters by Title IX. Many of us who do law-related work have kind of figured out a little niche for ourselves, which is to say, well, I'm providing legal advice. And in that capacity, you can't make me a mandated reporter. But it comes from, I like to call it maternalism rather than paternalism, because I really do think that the impetus for this stuff comes from a good place. It comes from a place of, we want you to be safe, we want you to be well, we want to take care of you. But it's equally as misguided in the idea that someone else should be making decisions for anybody who's been subjected to any form of gender violence other than the person who's been subjected to that violence. And it's all about liability, right? The fact that we're mandated reporters is all about liability for the university and not at all about what's best for the person who's been subjected to violence. And that I find to be deeply problematic and deeply offensive. And it runs kind of parallel with some of the efforts to make all reports that are made about Title IX then have to be reported to law enforcement, right? So a lot of what's driving mandated reporting is also driving this idea that a complaint of sexual violence isn't legitimate unless it's also communicated to law enforcement in some way, which I think is even more deeply problematic in the campus context in some ways than it is in other contexts. And so what you've pointed at for me is what makes me talk about gender violence as opposed to intimate partner violence. It's why my clinic is a gender violence clinic, because as Candace said, right, these forms of violence not only coexist, they are completely enmeshed in many important ways. Fair amount of Title IX violence is intimate partner violence, right? It's not just stranger rape and sexual assault. It comes in the context of intimate relationships. So we need to be thinking about all of these things together, and we need to be learning from our mistakes. And the best place that I can...
that we made them.
Yeah, and the best place that I think that shows up actually right now is in the trafficking movement. Not all, many of the mistakes that we made in the context of intimate partner violence are being made again in trafficking, and now are being made again in Title IX.
About them as
and I think
issues.
You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I want to add something to that also, especially now that, being in the university and really being quite horrified by what's happened. A lot of what I do is also critique what social movements do. So we are horrified by the amount of campus rape. We're horrified by the kind of medieval approaches that we had. You look, I was at UC Berkeley, and when I looked at the processes that we had around sexual assault on campus, it was unbelievable. Thinking about this as being a progressive campus. This was before the 2013 VAWA. But seeing this now, we don't even have the benefit of having a movement that's also outside the criminal justice system. Everything is happening within a university institution that's dealing with another thing that's the criminal justice system. So there's almost like no way out. And what I've seen, really, not only are we mandated reporters, but if we have a student or anybody who we want to offer a process that's off campus, that is actually against, I mean, we could get fired for that. So it's not only mandated reported, but even saying like there are remedies that you may, like maybe there's a restorative justice program or something like that off campus. To actually even say that is against the rules. Now, this is such a blatant example of how we have taken a demand to do something about gender-based violence and then have a remedy that is absolutely not what we want, and one that we could actually get arrested for or lose our jobs over for merely suggesting somebody use something off campus. I mean, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, so, obviously, one of the things that the book talks about not at all, really, is the civil side of things. And ideally, right, in its best iteration, the civil side of things is the answer to some of the abuses that we've talked about, ideally. Because it's something that the person subjected to abuse controls, because it provides a greater range of remedies other than just locking somebody up. One of the complications is the criminal enforceability of protective orders and the ways in which that implicates some of the same issues. Another is about the effectiveness of protective orders, and the research on that is mixed. And I'll tell you, as a lawyer, my experience with them is that protective orders deter the people who are deterred by the thought of the criminal consequences that come with violating them, and don't deter others. And so, for example, we had a client this week who we were helping get a protective order, and he ran her off the road on the way to court. Temporary protective orders in effect, violated the temporary protective order by running her off the road. Then she sat by the side of the road for an hour waiting for the police to show up. And my students said to me, why are we telling her to do this? Because what we've told her is the only thing this gives you, because we know it won't deter him, is an enhanced police response, and you didn't get that either. Like, how can we make this case? And so the civil side of things is complicated. That being said, I think that's where we see experimentation in this area. So, for example, there are 2 or 3 states that cover economic abuse in civil protective orders that don't cover it, right, in the criminal context. And it's a kind of a better, I think, safer way to start to think about how to address some of these other forms of abuse without bringing in all of the kind of attendant collateral consequences that I've talked about. But it's not a perfect remedy. And, the other piece about civil protective orders that I'll say is, they were intended to be emergency responses that people could go in pro se and do for themselves. And we have a study out of Maryland showing that the pro se piece of that is really complicated. In that most of our clients, if you just showed them the order, wouldn't really know what to ask for or how it works. Asking people to fill out their own forms is problematic. Sending them into court without representation is deeply problematic. In Maryland, in our court system, 83% of the people with representation got final orders, 32% of the people without got them. And that says something about something that was meant to be a pro se and emergency remedy. I have litigated 5-day-long protective order trials. Right? So it's a better option for me, in my opinion, than the criminal side of things. But I think we need to be attendant to what it really does and doesn't do. Alicia Durfee, who is a criminologist out of Arizona State University, and I have a piece coming out where we've basically argued that we shouldn't call them protective orders because you have to have, but also because you have to have violence that's already happened before you can get one. We should think about them as enhanced response orders. And when we think about them that way, maybe there's a different way to think about the kind of the range of things that it could cover.
Yeah.
I also don't know if you were also talking about civil lawsuits for, and I just want to say something about that because I don't remember the figures right now, but when Time's Up campaign, things move so fast. You're like, Time's Up, yeah, remember that? So within a week, I believe that they raised about $14 million. A lot of money. I have to say one thing that did bother me about that was that what did that money go for? The money went for representation in civil lawsuits. So I'm not entirely against civil lawsuits, but when you have, I think I think everything about a balanced policy is looking at what are the responses that you're going to come up with. So if all the money then goes towards individualized lawsuits, this is not the way that we're going to end violence.
Right.
And there's also an imputation of privilege to be able to bring a suit or to go to court to get a protective order. I mean, as Leigh was talking, I was thinking about how the danger that some of my patients would feel they were in just by interacting with the judicial system, whether because they might be deported, because they expected to be blamed, because they were in fear of having to confront their abusive partner in court, retaliation. I mean, we all know that the risk of homicide exponentiates the moment that the victim makes a step toward leaving. And so I think that there are tremendous risks and privilege burdens that are associated anytime we start to go through that system.
Okay, first of all, I mean, I think when we say mandatory, that right now is a red flag. So whenever we have, I don't think I need to say too much more. I'll let Leigh take off on that one as well. Also, the world of batterer intervention program, I think we have at least one person here, is very, there are many people right now that say they just don't work. I'm not one of those people. I think we have a great researcher, Edward Gondolf, who agrees that if you have a somewhat decent batterer intervention program and somebody goes for 24 weeks, there is lowered recidivism, and I agree with that.
In California, it's 52 weeks.
No, it's 52 weeks,
Yeah.
but
But Gondolf's research shows.
Gondolf's research says 24 is the minimum.
The reason that if you go for 24 weeks, and I understand that the mandate is for 52 weeks here. So I think that we have a lot more to do in terms of a generous look at batterer intervention programs. We are in a period when there is less and less money going to any of this. So what does that mean when you have a mandatory law and you have no research, you don't have programs, you have great programs. I have seen beautiful programs that got funded with CDC money, $500,000. Well,
And when the money was gone, so was the program.
It was beautiful. I went to one in Hawaii where they had a program that used cultural values. No, one of the things people drop out of programs. Not one man dropped out of that program for the entire time. And lives changed. As soon as that money was gone, the program was gone. We have a system in the United States right now that is constantly funding we'll see what happens with the pilot I'm doing right now. The pilot works oftentimes, and the money is gone, and you better find some big fancy thing for the next time. So I guess there's many things I can say, but the reality is this is the way things work in this country, and we have to make
We have no public safety net. We really just do not have a public funding safety net for programs that have been shown to work.
Yeah. So I'm all for what I call it like community mandated batterer intervention programs, or where the transformative justice programs, restorative justice programs, where a community feels like, one, there's a place to go to, there's actually a program there, and two, that listen, we love you, we care about you, we hate what you're doing, and you need to go. That I think we need to strengthen.
Yeah, the programs that I think work are programs that engage with people around things they care about. Programs that engage around fatherhood, programs that engage around culture. those kinds of things, rather than saying to somebody, you are abusive because it's the patriarchy and it's your role in the system and you have to stop, those are not working. And so the part of the problem is that we've created this entire system of batterer intervention programs that all have to look a particular way and all have to meet certain criteria, very few of which are supported by the research. And so I think that's problematic. There are also really great programs that are thinking about how you engage communities. So there's a program in Atlanta, for example, in which not only do you come for the program, but you bring a member of your community with you. And they get to see the program. They get to see what you're experiencing. They are then a person who holds you accountable, and maybe they get to confront some of their own behavior in the offing. So thinking about the ways in which we integrate the things that we know are helpful or that we know that people care about, right? What are the levers for change? What are the things that make people want to change? But I think just creating one more mandatory requirement is not a place where we create meaningful change, because we're not then interacting with people around the things that can help them to make that change. We're just kind of cookie cutter putting one more thing out there for them.
And there are volumes of research in healthcare about behavior change, and why it doesn't work unless there are certain factors in place. And so I think, going back to what both Mimi and Leigh have said about the mandated setup, is problematic because people are not motivated to change. There is not value in change when you are mandated to do something, unless there is benefit to be had from doing it.
And I got to tell you, in the worst case that I ever had, the guy that was married to my client managed to destroy an entire group. He was so toxic and so resistant to change, and he was just such a horrible, horrible person that he turned an entire group. So there's so many different variables to think about.